Good evening and welcome to Your Idaho, where we discuss issues facing our state and its citizens. This program is brought to you by the GemStatePatriot.com, an Idaho-based electronic newsletter. My name is Bob Neugebauer. I publish the Gem State Patriot. Our special guest for this evening is Alexandria Kincaid. She's a former district attorney, founder of 3G Law, and chief counsel for public relations director of Idaho Firearms and Accessories Manufacturers Association. Tonight we'll be talking about Second Amendment rights from a legal viewpoint. Good evening, Alexandria. How are you tonight?
Hi, Bob. I'm great.
Let's start off with the most recent bill. Actually, there were two of them, but the campus carry bill that was just signed into law. How do you feel about that, and how do you think it's going to affect our campuses and our laws here in terms of being a Second Amendment rights state?
Well, I'm glad that campuses are no longer a gun-free zone. So, you know, it was a step in the right direction. Personally, I feel that the bill didn't accomplish enough for gun owners. It, for example, is not going to affect my life very much. I'm a patron of the university. I go there for special events. I go to the football games. The locations where I am going to want to carry a firearm for self-protection are not included in that bill. In fact, they're prohibited places so long as the university posts a notice. I know there was a lot of discussion amongst people about thinking that all of a sudden students are going to go out and start carrying guns on campus. And the students, in fact, I'll give you an example. I had coffee one morning with an instructor at the university, and he was very against this bill. He said, "How would you feel standing in my shoes and teaching a class and knowing that a student might be in the classroom with a gun?" Well, the students who are likely to break the law and kill another human being don't really care what the laws say.
Right.
So I think that argument doesn't make any sense. The students who are allowed to carry guns on campus, number one, have to be 21 years of age because you have to have an enhanced carry permit. They can't carry back to the dorm. So this bill was full of limiting factors, and all I can say is it's a step in the right direction. I'm glad that our campuses in Idaho are not gun-free zones, which we know as killing zones, but there's certainly more that we can still do.
Well, truth be said, we have to admit that guns have been carried on that state campus for the last 20 or 30 years.
Exactly.
It's just that nobody wanted to admit it.
Right.
So there's really no difference in what's happening now than what happened then. How do you feel about the 21-year-olds carrying the guns out there? Do you think they're responsible enough?
Of course. We ask 18-year-olds to carry guns and defend our country. 21-year-olds are responsible enough to carry. I've been shooting since I was 5. I carried when I was 18 and went off to college.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I was a young lady. You know, you have to defend yourself, and you're either going to have the victim mentality or you're going to take some responsibility and learn.
You've written several articles for our newsletter about children. You wrote one in particular called Kids, Guns, and the Law. And the article you talked about 3 responsible young ladies you interviewed that enjoyed shooting guns. What do you think that our educators want to have our children fear guns? Why do you think they want them to fear these guns, these implements of safety and of protection?
I think that there are certain people within the education system who agree with the government's agenda to have everyone fear guns and to implement gun control. I don't think we can say across the board that all people in the education system want the children to fear guns. But we do have these zero tolerance policies that are in place where the mere thought of a firearm, kids pointing a finger or using a pastry or wearing a pro-Second Amendment shirt, are being punished for that behavior and that thinking and that support of our right to use firearms to protect ourselves. And I think that, you know, the people who think that's a good idea are in line with the government people who think that, you know, we should be indoctrinating our youth to not like firearms so that they can further push their agenda.
As far as the children in school now, a lot of the schools have a zero tolerance policy. I remember a young man that wore a T-shirt with pro-Second Amendment on it, another that ate his cake in the shape of a gun and another who pointed his finger like this at somebody, and they were all suspended. What's your opinion on that legally?
On the children being suspended?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a violation. It shouldn't be done. I think that parents need to take a stand and stand up to this when that occurs, rather than just being complacent and saying, oh, my kid broke the rules because this is a school policy. It's our Constitution that is at stake here, particularly when we hear the instances where kids are doing nothing other than wearing a pro-Second Amendment type of article of clothing.
Now, Oklahoma, they instituted a new law, a very similar law that I guess they tried to bring up in our Congress. But it protects children from reactionary teachers and administrators. Is this something you think we'll ever get here in Idaho, or do you think we're just going to be stuck with what we have right now?
I hope, Bob, that it will get here in Idaho. It can be difficult to push legislation through. We've seen that now over and over. And even pro-gun legislation, when we have sponsors and people who are behind the laws, it can be a process and something that just doesn't happen. Florida recently passed a similar bill to protect the children. And it's a great idea. It's unfortunate and sad that we have to pass laws to protect kids who are playing guns and robbers, or cops and robbers, and wearing shirts and such, but it seems to be necessary.
Well, we're protecting rights that were actually given to us under the Constitution.
Exactly.
Why are we even doing that?
Right.
That's where I come from.
Right.
I mean, you could see what happened up in northern Idaho with this guy, Youngdahl, who wanted to have the teachers armed. And all of a sudden there was a recall election for him.
Right.
Now that's got to tell you something about the mentality of the people here in Idaho, or at least in that particular area.
In that location. It's astounding to me, but why would we not want our children protected in the best way possible? And if there's a possibility that someone can come in with a gun, maybe we need the same type of force for protection purposes.
It's a shame that we have all these gun-free zones, because every major problem, every major shooting incident has been in a gun-free zone.
Right.
In the theater, in a mall,
right,
in the schools, and on an Army base of all places.
It is very sad. I sit back and wonder, when are people going to get a clue? Have you seen this letter that a soldier wrote? It was posted on the Blaze. Saying, you're killing us, we can't defend ourselves. When are we going to take a stand and say enough is enough? This has happened twice at the same gun-free location.
Well, and yeah, again, this is a gun-free zone. Why is a military base a gun-free zone?
Good question.
I remember.
I have that question too, Bob.
I used to be in the Philippines, and we were in a communications base, security base, and we carried 45s every place we went around the base.
Yeah.
That was just normal. I cannot believe that we do not have armed personnel on our Army bases or Navy bases or any military base for that matter.
Right. It's completely illogical from my perspective. These are trained soldiers. We don't have guns, really?
Well, and the first people on the scene to protect them are the civilian police.
Right.
Not even the military police.
Right.
It's kind of scary what I see coming up here. I'd like to touch base a little bit about the Castle Doctrine, which is a law that we have here, and explain why Idaho got a low rating of 2 in a national poll on a scale of 1 to 10.
Well, Idaho has a law that justifies a homicide under certain circumstances. One of the provisions of that law allows a homeowner to defend oneself if somebody violently or tumultuously breaks into the home or tries to enter a home and commit violence or a felony against the homeowner. So the law is, first of all, it's not particularly clearly worded. There are things that are left open to interpretation, such as what is violent and tumultuous, and all these wonderful words that are thrown into this statute mean. How are those going to play out in actual fact scenarios? What constitutes the definition of those words? And we don't have a statute that is as protective as we see in other states, such as some of the best castle doctrines, which are in Florida and Texas. you want me to elaborate on that?
I'd like to, you know, I remember what happened down in Florida with that stand your ground law.
Right.
Now, is that different than the Castle Doctrine?
Yes, and people confuse those laws because stand your ground means you have somebody in front of you, I'm going to simplify this, okay, who is intending to use deadly force. Your life is threatened. You reasonably believe your life is threatened. Another person would reasonably believe their life was threatened if they were standing in your shoes. Our laws do not require that you make a split-second decision on whether you could safely flee or whether you should use deadly force to protect yourself in that circumstance. You may stand your ground and defend your life. You don't have to turn and run, even if you could have safely done that. That's a stand your ground. Castle doctrine, think my home is my castle.
Right.
Okay? My home is my castle. There are certain laws that give you special protection and a little more leeway to use deadly force when you are inside your own home. So in places like Florida and Texas, where they have, again, some of the best castle doctrines in the country, if I wake up in the middle of the night and there's an intruder in my home, the law allows me to presume that that person intends to cause me great bodily harm or kill me, and I can use deadly force.
That's in Texas and Florida.
Right.
What about here?
So it's a matter of presumption. Okay, the law is going to presume that you, the homeowner, are in the right and the intruder is in the wrong. Here in Idaho, you have to be able to articulate that the intruder intended to cause you great bodily harm or kill you. Okay? So if you can't do that, you wake up in the night, there's a stranger, you'd better be sure that that's not your drunk neighbor who, you know, bumbled into the house. You certainly better not shoot somebody who's taken the TV off the wall, because you're going to have to prove that you were justified, and that's a justifiable homicide statute, in taking that other human life.
Let me throw a hypothetical question at you.
Okay.
Let's say it's the middle of the night, and some SWAT team decides that they're going to come see if they can find any drugs in my house. They break down my door. They come in. They start screaming and hollering. How am I to know whether they're really police or they're a bunch of robbers coming into my house? And do I have the right to shoot them?
Well, if they are acting lawfully within the course of their duty as a SWAT team, as law enforcement officers, they're carrying out their official duties, you don't have a right to shoot them.
And if they don't announce or have a warrant?
Well, they will announce and they will have a warrant, because they're not going to undertake something like that without going through those hoops ordinarily. Okay? But in the circumstance that you're describing, you might launch that as a defense that you couldn't have known what was happening at the time. But you really need to be able to ascertain, under the laws that we have here now, whether that person is lawfully in your home or not, and whether they intend to wrongfully commit violence against you. If you've committed a crime and law enforcement comes in your home to arrest you, you can't just shoot them, but you couldn't do that in other states either.
Just a point in fact, there was a couple in Caldwell, and the SWAT team came out to their home. Actually, it was an apartment, and they had the wrong address. And they broke down the door. They put him in handcuffs, took him outside, and then proceeded to find out they were the wrong people.
Right. But did they announce themselves as law enforcement?
They did, and they said, don't do anything because our dog will bite you. Well, evidently the fellow didn't have a gun.
Right.
I don't know, maybe he would have shot him if he did.
Right.
Because I know that's happened before.
Right. And under those circumstances, we have a different scenario, because now other issues are coming into play and other facts are coming into play. This isn't a criminal that they went, but if they announce themselves as law enforcement, the law really expects you to comply and then figure it out later.
Yeah, but they broke the door down.
Right.
All they did was say, this is the police, and broke the door down.
Right.
Well, that would scare me enough to get my gun.
Right. Right. It's a very bad situation, Bob.
Well, I think that sooner or later we're going to have to do a little more challenging of these police tactics when they come in there with no real warrant from a judge, and they have just a warrant from an FBI agent or from an agency. That's where the problem is going to be.
Well, we've seen those.
Yes, I know, I know. Why is it so difficult to get our legislators to put legislation through here? We had about 12 bills that were in the legislature this year, and only one got passed.
Right. I think a couple more got passed, but only one
Well,
major bill got
one major one got through.
Right,
We
right,
had a couple
right.
of others.
Well, I think, you know, a lot of times it comes down to who is backing a particular piece of legislation. And we certainly had people, our representatives and senators, who were in full support of more than that one bill. But that one bill, and we're talking about the campus carry bill, was in fact backed by an organization that had a lobbyist and money to spend, and that was their priority. So, you know, that's what happened. And it's sad, and I've said this before, that it becomes a system of priorities. I don't understand it either. Why are we a pro-gun, what's seen as a pro-gun state? We support the Second Amendment here. The majority does. Why are we picking and choosing, you know?
Well, you brought part of it out by saying we had a lobbyist with money.
Right.
So once again, money talks, everybody else walks.
Money always talks, Bob.
Absolutely. That's I always say, follow the money, you'll find out everything you want to know in life.
That's right.
Let's get a little bit into what are the major impediments of lawful gun ownership today?
Well, major impediments include that there are just too many laws. And I don't think enough people hear that there are more than 20,000 gun laws across this country.
Wow.
I say it over and over and over again, but what I find in my practice is that law-abiding citizens who are gun owners want to obey the laws. They just don't know what they are. There's too many of them. Mm-hmm. And they aren't all what I would call common sense in any way. They aren't, you know, there are laws that apply to possession or transfer, how old somebody is if they have a note or if they're doing a particular activity, if a gun goes across state lines, if a gun needs to be mailed. All these different rules and particularities, it's gotten to the point where you need to either be adept in reading the laws on your own, or you need to consult with an attorney in order to figure out what in the heck you can do.
And we certainly don't want the federal government at this particular stage to try and streamline these rules, because then we know what the outcome would be.
Well, of course. They just, you know, let's make a blanket,
yeah.
No guns, and the problem's solved, right?
Yeah, we're better off dealing with the restrictions we have now and working them out.
Right.
Hasn't gun control in other states or even foreign countries reduced crime?
No, I think that's a common misconception. We have countries like Australia, Canada, in Britain. The crime rate has actually gone up since the gun control laws have been implemented, the violent crime rate. The people in Britain are more likely to be the victim of a violent crime than those of us in the United States of America. So when I hear that, and I recently had a student at the university writing a paper and asked me that question, and I pointed him to the facts that I found on the internet. Where do you hear this? Where is this coming from? Because it's not the truth. And if you do the least amount of research and look at the statistics, both internationally and domestically, you will see that gun control laws do not reduce crime. A researcher named John Lott did studies on this. Gun control does not work. Criminals don't care what the law says.
Right. It's just law-abiding citizens that care.
Right. Right, so there are more restrictions on those of us who try to comply, and then, you know, I've seen people break the law just because they don't know, and that's when I say, you know, don't commit the accidental felony.
Well, and we've been saying for a long time that the more guns that people actually have on them and are walking around with, the less crime you're going to have.
Exactly.
We have very little crime here in Idaho. You know, it's one of the best places to live in the United States.
Right.
We hear that all the time.
Right.
And yet we have everybody complaining that too many guns, too many guns out there, too many people with guns. Well,
Right.
I'll tell you what, I moved out here from New York City way back in '93 because I couldn't get a gun license in New York City or New Jersey because of their laws.
Right.
And I had guns pointed at my face 3 times. I'm lucky to be alive today.
Right.
Out here, I feel so much safer because I don't know who's got a gun, but I know there's always going to be somebody around to protect me somewhere.
Right.
How do you feel about these gun-free zones? Because we've been talking a lot about that. I consider them killing zones, and I would bet you're on the same path.
I am absolutely on the same path, Bob. That's where our mass murders are committed, period. It's where it happens.
Yeah, I always say that the criminals always come out in the places that you least expect them. But you can always expect them to come out in a place where you don't have any guns
Right.
or any defenses.
Right. Well, criminals are worried about whether they can get what they want and whether they can get away with it.
Exactly.
And if there's a gun-free zone, they pretty much are assured of the right answer for their interview on both of those questions.
As far as children go, I learned how to shoot when I was 7 years old. And I've been shooting for a long time. Do you think that there should be a slow but sure indoctrination for kids, or have an opportunity to go out there and learn how to shoot and learn about guns? I mean, right now it seems like they're locked out except for their home life.
Right, and that's true. And what is wrong with empowering our students with knowledge and responsibility and giving them an opportunity to enjoy a sport? That kids participate nowadays in shooting competitions. I recently did an interview with Mike and Rhonda Gibson, who have started the Junior Shooter Camp. They have a company named MGM Targets, and it is an amazing opportunity for kids to be around real live American heroes who were soldiers, to people who they can look up to, and to compete in a sport that teaches them skills that they could actually use for hunting or self-defense purposes later in life.
Well, I've got a granddaughter. She's about 22 now, and she loves to go out and shoot trap. And she's extremely good at it. It's just that I never had the time to go out with her. Now she's working and she's going to school, so she doesn't have the time to see Grandpa anymore.
Well, and you know, so we both started shooting when we were young. I had a .22. My brother and I would go out, we'd shoot cans, we'd shoot targets. Not once did I shoot an animal or, you know, think about using that gun for anything other than, you know, plinking around and doing what my dad said I could do with it.
Yeah, I remember those days. Nowadays somebody sees you out there in the middle of a field and you're shooting something, they think you're shooting something important.
Right, right. And people panic at the sight of a gun, too.
I'm kind of curious as to your take about all of these rumors that have gone around about Homeland Security and how many of these hollow point bullets they've been buying for all of the different departments and agencies in the government. Aside from the fact that they want to make ammunition expensive, and they've done that, prices have gone up exponentially in the last 3 years, as we all know. But do you have any fear that there is actually something out there, there's actually a purpose for this?
Of course. I don't know what the right answer is, Bob, but you know, when I look at what's going on in government, they might be expecting some type of civil unrest that they're trying to protect against, or they might be planning to institute some laws. I don't know what's going on. I'm not going to try to say that I have any insight in that, because I think there are very few people in that loop who actually know what is going on. But when you hear the sheer numbers and you see the different things and you see the blatant disregard for our Constitution and the agendas that are being pushed, how could that not cross your mind?
Well, we saw some of that this morning down in Nevada, where this fella Cliven Bundy, been around for a long time. He's probably the last rancher in Clark County down in Nevada. And he's down there, and here you have the BLM rustling his cattle. Confiscating them. I mean, his family has been there for over 130 years, if not more, and been using that for grazing land. And then, of course, the BLM says, well, you can't do that because we made some laws that say you can't do that. You got to pay for it. There was an awful lot of guns pulled down there. I saw the video this morning. Tasers, guns, you name it. How do you feel about the reaction from the officials that we have running our government agencies in a situation like that? Because it just seems like they inflamed it. And made it worse.
Well, they do. They inflame it for their own purposes.
I mean, I saw these people out there, and they were taking pictures. Some of them were very calm, and then they started getting pushy. They started pushing them around. This goes back again. This was a First Amendment's right type thing, where they were trying to gather, and they didn't want to let them gather there. So as an attorney, what would you tell them?
Tell the people who were,
Yep.
yeah. Well, you know, the trouble is, and the place I find myself giving advice too often is, how much do you want to take on? You know, you may be in the right. You're either going to take it on right then and there and, you know, inflame the situation too, or you're going to wait it out and try the courts of law and hope that justice is served. So it's a difficult situation. One of my favorite sayings is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that works on both sides.
Right.
The government officials, maybe some laws are passed and they're in the right, but maybe there's a right way and a wrong way to get those laws enforced.
I understand. We've had a lot of conversation about constitutional carry, and we actually had a bill that was stopped in the Senate that was going to take the gun rights away from all of our elected officials,
Right.
which is a law that's been on the books for 100 years here.
Right.
And understandably, all the elected officials at some point in time have a target on their back from somebody that gets upset with them. Mm-hmm. And this law was stopped in the Senate, and it was kind of blamed on Russ Fulcher for some reason.
Right.
Because I guess, you know, Russ is a constitutional carry type person. Mm-hmm. And how would you think they were looking at that? The fact that if they did put this law through, that would be worse than killing it?
Yeah, that again is, that was unfortunate. I am not about taking the right to carry away from anybody. I support it. And on the other hand, it should apply to everyone. And if our politicians can constitutionally carry, why can't law-abiding citizens constitutionally carry?
Right.
There shouldn't be a special group of people. You know, killing this bill when it would have opened up some doors for the rest of us, and it would have just said, politicians, go get your concealed carry permit.
Right.
I'm not sure that was the right thing to do, but.
Well, there was a second bill that the governor signed, and it had to do with nullifying any new federal laws that came in mm-hmm. on gun laws. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that bill?
This is the bill, you're speaking of the one that was proposed by
I think it's
Judy Boyle
1332.
was supporting it, and
yes.
Yeah, and that one actually went through, as I understood it.
Well, yes, I mean, here the governor is saying, well, he's going to nullify these gun laws that the feds may make mm-hmm. after he signed the bill, but here's another governor who also would nullify Obamacare, so I have to wonder, what is his purpose here? Is he just trying to placate the gun rights people?
Probably to some degree. This was a bill, as you said, that came through for the second time. It was rewritten in the hopes of getting the Sheriff's Office on, or the Sheriff's Association on board, as I understood it. The question, you know, for me, this bill had limited importance because a similar law is being reviewed by the Supreme Court, and other states have passed laws of this nature. It's not clear whether they are constitutionally sound. So it's a nice thing to have on the books. It feels good. It's one of those feel-good laws, I would say, but whether it's actually going to work out at the end of the day, we don't know.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being here tonight, Alexandria. I do appreciate it. I'd like to thank our technicians, and I'd like to thank the people from TVC TV. And if you have an opportunity, go to their website, tdctv.org, and donate a couple dollars to these guys. They do a lot of good work. Thank you very much, and have a good night, Idaho.